So if we're only getting news sources of a small sample, the worst case scenarios, could that be affecting the way we see the whole thing?
Maybe.
How you been?
Good.
Good.
Yourself?
Not too bad.
You good?
So we've got an interesting one to talk about today. Tell me if you want to change this, but this is the way I've written it down. So in some instances, you believe it is true that in some instances the Queensland Government's policy on lockdowns is immoral?
Yes.
Is that a fair framing of it?
Yes.
Okay. All right. And well, let's explore this. We'll try and keep this one quick too. So we'll try and keep it to 15 minutes, but we'll see how we go. We can break it up into parts if we need to. Yeah.
I'll give you my views, but I don't want it to be politically.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Politicised.
Are you comfortable if I guide it by asking you very focused questions, and then and we'll try and
I'll answer what I can.
Yeah.
And what I believe I should.
Okay. So what are you? In some instances, the Queensland Government's policy on lockdowns is immoral. Well, do you want to start by giving me your best example of what's an example where
I think
a lockdown has been immoral?
I think we should be treating people who got stuck outside of Queensland, who have lived in Queensland all their life.
Yeah.
I find we should be treating them with more compassion.
Okay.
Like the young boy who was stuck in, I don't know, Canberra, outside Canberra somewhere on a farm with his grandparents. They wouldn't let him back in.
Yeah.
But as soon as the parents went to Channel 7 News and it went to air, they approved his entry.
Okay.
I mean, why do we have to go to the press to get a compassionate answer?
So this was a lockdown
Well, people had left the state, and all of a sudden there was a sudden lockdown, and they were locked out.
Okay.
Their home state,
okay,
where they've lived all their lives.
What's the main reason from the Queensland Government for doing that? What's their main reason?
Oh, they might bring the virus back.
Okay, so it's a risk to the community.
But most of the people who are complaining, who come from Queensland and can't get back in, I mean, most of them that I've seen interviewed have been vaccinated, they've been tested, all the rest of it. Why won't they let them in? I mean, come on,
Okay.
where's the empathy and the compassion about your own people?
So you say that's immoral in the sense that that's causing harm?
Totally immoral.
Okay.
I think
Sounds like you're really confident in this.
I think it is breaking down the family fabric.
Okay.
Right? Because it is separating families and creating a problem in a family that never existed before.
Yeah. I can see, And I can see that you're really confident in this one. I don't need to ask. You're like right up there.
Let me state from the beginning, I'm not a Labor voter. I'm a Conservative voter. I think overall, this... Let's go.
So what I'm hearing, maybe I'll just do a quick summary to see if I'm getting this right. So the main reason I'm hearing is the policy decision of keeping Queensland residents locked out. They can't come back to their family members and rejoin. And this is immoral because there's harm. I heard you say breaking down family fabric.
Yep.
So there's a harm to that. That's why it's immoral. And you're really confident that that's
immoral.
In
this day and age, if this had happened 15 years ago, we would know about it. Because there wasn't the television coverage and the news coverage and all that. We didn't have access to all this. But with the modern technology and modern news feeds, we, the general public, get access to all this thing that's happening around. But what can we do about it? Nothing. But watch this person stand up saying, now this is what we've got to do.
And the reason I heard that you said that they give for that is because there's an unacceptable risk of the virus coming into the state?
Well, that's the reason they give. And look, I can understand that. I mean, we don't want 1,500 cases a day like they're getting in New South Wales. We don't want that in Queensland. We've had a couple of lockdowns here on the coast. I don't like it.
What's the main reason for not allowing residents back in but isolating? What's the main reason for not allowing that?
Well, because they reckon they could bring the virus in. That's what they're saying. Because this Delta virus is just so transmissible.
So infectious, okay.
Yeah. I mean, they're charging $2,800 a week or something for hotel quarantine. Why can't they quarantine at home?
So, in this case, with Queensland residents coming back, what I'm hearing is that the reason for not allowing them to quarantine is because it's so infectious? Is that what I'm hearing? Okay.
But if you're going to home here and you've lived in Queensland all your life, or 30 years, whatever, why can't you come back and self-quarantine in your own home?
Okay. So what could you learn? What could you learn or discover that would increase your confidence that this is immoral, in the sense that this is really breaking down family fabric?
My son's wife, her sister, was involved in an instance down at Tugun in a chemist shop where an infectious person came in. She had to self-isolate at home because of that. They rang her every day to make sure she was there. Why can't they do that with people coming from across the border who lived here? I'm not talking about people who buy a house here and then think, oh, I've got a right to move there. I'm in Australia. I mean, all they're doing is buying a house and trying to get away from the problematical area of their state. Hey, quarantine them all your life. They're just trying to use the system to get away from the bad area. I'm talking about Queenslanders who got stuck outside and can't get back into their own home. That's, I think, the immoral part.
Did I hear you say that if you're from Queensland, if you're from New South Wales and you're returning to New South Wales, they would let you to do so if you isolated in your own home? Is that what I heard you say, or did I hear that wrong? Okay.
No one, as I see it at the moment, no state government is allowing home life self-isolation.
Okay. So what? You're pretty confident that this is immoral, like that there's harm to the fabric of families?
In my mind, I'm very confident.
0 to 100, where would you be sitting on that? 80,
98?
98, right up there, okay. So there's not much room to increase your confidence then, but is there anything that you could learn to put you to 99? Is there anything that you could discover that would show this is definitely breaking down family fabric?
Unless there's a lot of intricate stuff that they're not telling us, that they're not being transparent about. No. But I'll get back to a statement I made here before we started this recording. Politicians are liars. They're liars.
The main reason for it being immoral is they're breaking down family fabric. So what have you seen?
It can do.
It can do.
It can do.
So have you? You're at 98% that this is immoral.
Yep.
Is it actually breaking down family fabric? What's the connection?
Not in every instance.
Okay.
But you get a child, 2-year-old child removed from its mother for 5 months.
Yep.
Where's the bonding? I mean, the early life of a child, bonding with the parents is important.
Okay. Yeah.
Very important.
So.
And whilst grandparents are good and all the rest of it, but what I'm saying is it doesn't break down the family fabric every time.
Okay.
But it must put strain.
Yeah.
There was 2 sisters on the news who were hanging over the border. One got caught in New South Wales, and 60 odd each.
Yeah.
And they were just, I mean, you could see them shaking.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll get back to the same question. Where is the compassion? That woman had lived in Queensland all her life, 60 years. She went to New South Wales once and got caught. And they won't let her back in.
Okay.
I mean, if she gets vaccinated and if she gets tested, I mean, around the world they're using these tests that give them a result in 5 minutes. Why aren't we using this? They're 90% accurate.
If these people are vaccinated, are they still locked out?
Yeah.
They're still locked out even if they're vaccinated? Okay.
Yeah. They have to get a clearance from the health department,
Yep.
which is the next thing.
Yeah.
There's 5,000 applications in the health department currently for exemption for people to come back into Queensland. 5,000, and they haven't increased the staff to examine.
Okay.
Now what happens is, public servant, there's the application. Going through, oh, I'm going to have a smoke.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm going to have a coffee. Then someone gets on the news and starts sprouting about what they're doing. Oh, we'll go to the, oh, there he is, approved.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just becoming a joke.
Yeah. Okay.
And Ms. won't increase the staff to cover these exemptions, to examine these exemptions. And I've got no doubt that there's people there who try to get in who don't deserve to get in. I know, I understand that. Some people are just stupid, right? Like hiding in the boot of the car in the back of the coach. Rubbish like that. I mean, that's how badly they want to get away from where they've been. But I'm talking about Queenslanders coming back into their own home state.
Okay. So if we were to put this on a continuum of harm, so if we imagine a line, continuum of harm, it seems like there are some Queenslanders where you see there's clearly more harm to them, like young children separated from mothers.
Yeah.
That's a good example.
Yeah.
And then who else would fall into this category where there's clearly unacceptable harm occurring?
What
to
about
those people?
the Queensland, the other day, perfect example, Queenslander on TV, right? He'd gone to Sydney for some specialist heart treatment, which could only be done at the, I think it was the Royal North Shore Hospital.
Yeah.
Came back, they wouldn't let him in, and while they were talking to him on TV, he collapsed with a heart attack. They had to call the ambulance. Now they took him to John Flynn Hospital, which is in Queensland.
Yeah.
So in an ambulance, you can get through. But he's standing there with after heart surgery, and they wouldn't let him back in. And of course the question was, why didn't you fly him? My doctor told heart, you're not allowed to fly. So where's the compassion in that?
John Flynn's in Tweed Heads, isn't it?
No.
Is it right on the border?
It's
Just
in
across?
Balinga.
Ah, okay.
It's just north of the airport. It's in Queensland.
Yeah. Okay.
The border runs across the southern end of the runway.
Yep. Okay.
The John Flynn
we've
Hospital is the northern end.
Gotcha. So we've got people who are vulnerable, needing medical treatment. That's clear harm to them.
The girl with cancer.
Yeah.
Right? She had cancer, her head shaved, she bloody had oxygen on like I had and all that crap. And she'd been to Sydney for some type of treatment.
Yeah.
They wouldn't let her back in. Now her parents have built her a special, one of these, these single bedroom homes you can build in your backyard, like a bloody big cubby house type of thing. Their parents built her that.
Yeah.
And they said, why can't she come back and stay there? We'll feed her, we'll give her all the food, but she can stay there and isolate.
Okay.
No.
So
No
we've
way
got
in the world. Can't do that.
So we've got some clear examples. Children, vulnerable people, needing medical attention.
Yep.
So
And
clear
just
examples.
ordinary Queenslanders as well.
Okay. And where would they fall on the spectrum in terms of harm? Are these people being compensated if they're locked out of the state?
No.
So what if they have no money? How are they going to find accommodation?
Well, the older couple they interviewed the other day who had a caravan and they went into a caravan park. They can't pay the caravan fees. They owe about $12,000 for the caravan park. They can't pay it. They're pensioners.
So what happens to these people that don't have the money?
If the caravan park decides to tell them to go, they've got to go. What are they going to do? They're going to camp on the side of the road. Huh? Then some idiot will come along and smash into them and someone will get killed and all the politicians will go, oh, that should never happen.
Okay.
I just believe that the politicians in this state, I'm ashamed of what this government is doing to people who are Queensland.
So I'm wondering at the moment, we have all these people from Queensland who are locked out. How can we test to work out whether the examples that we're citing, where there's clear harm, what percentage of all the people does that represent? And how do we test this? And how do we know that this harm outweighs the harm from the infection?
The decisions that are made are crazy. Doctors and all the rest became an essential service, right? But they had to have their first jab before they could cross the border. So it's back to where you were before.
So Wayne, if they made exceptions for these people where there's clear cases of harm and they allowed them to come back, where are you sitting on this idea that it's immoral to lock the others out? Is in your view there's clearly a greater risk to the harm to those people locked out than there is to the rest of the community? What's your view on that?
My point is this. Quote an old saying, there is an exception to every rule. There's always an exception to every rule. I'm talking about Queensland, who have lived here all their lives, or most of their lives, being locked out of coming back after being caught unawares of a border change. There's not enough compassion for Queensland. People who've bought a house here and moving here from Victoria just to get away from the virus, hey, pay your lockdown fees or whatever. They're just trying to get away. At the expense of Queensland. I'm an Australian. We're just talking. Talk.
So there's no alternatives being offered?
There's got to be more compassion in the health department in assessing exemptions. That's what's got to happen.
So compassion with assessing exemptions?
A, there's got to be more compassion, and B, there's got to be more people to check the exemption applications.
How would they make decisions on, in your view, on who should get an exemption and who shouldn't?
I don't know. They're public servants. They do what they like, from what I can see. They would have a set of guidelines, I would imagine, they've got to work by. But if you've got a compassionate mind and one of those guidelines doesn't stack up, wouldn't you ask the question, well, I better check with someone who can make the decision? But they just seem to say, no. I mean, they were interviewing a guy the other night about, I think his wife or his daughter or something like that. And he'd made 14 applications for exemption. The health department said they had no record of any exemption applications whatsoever. Hadn't heard from anyone in 14 days. Got on the Channel 7 News, they found the application. Funny about that, huh? This is what gets me. All these things come about as soon as it hits the press. Until then, I mean, all it says to me is that if I've got a problem with the government, go to the press, you'll get your answer. That's my opinion.
Let's do a quick recap then. So there are some instances where the Queensland Government's policy on lockdowns is immoral. The main examples that you give are where there are vulnerable people, children, people where there's obvious harm to them being locked out for any period of time. It can be difficult to work out what, for you, that's the government's role, is to work out what criteria should be applied in order to give exemptions. Your view is they need to be more compassionate in assessing these applications. People are not having a fair go, is what I'm hearing, with their applications being assessed.
Queensland. Queensland.
Yeah, we're talking about Queensland.
Specify Queensland as only.
We're only talking about Queensland. What could you learn or discover that would maybe decrease your confidence that the government isn't being compassionate? Your view is they're not being compassionate? Your view is they're not being compassionate and that it's unfair? What could you learn that might decrease your confidence and say maybe it's not as unfair as I thought?
It's proof of the pudding. The decisions they're making are not compassionate decisions until it hits the press. All of a sudden they've got all the compassion in the world. Since when has a television camera
Yeah.
transmitted compassion.
Yeah. If those examples that we're seeing were a very small sample and the overwhelming majority, if someone was to say to you, not saying this is true at all, but if someone was to say to you that the overwhelming majority of the decisions were very compassionate and they gave you evidence of that, what would be your main reason for disagreeing with that then?
If decisions majority were made with compassion in mind, I could probably change my mind about the decision-making process. But they're doing nothing to increase or improve the decision-making process. Right? Yeah. 5,500 exemption applications. And all people are getting is no, refused, no, refused.
Is there enough transparency in the decision-making
No.
process? Okay. So is the real
Definitely
problem?
not.
So is the real problem here we can't see it?
Sorry to butt in. And there's not enough people checking these exemption applications.
Yeah.
Put more people on.
Yeah.
There's people out of work all over Queensland.
Yeah.
Employ 200 more people, put them in a room and say, right, check all these applications, this is your criteria.
Yeah.
They haven't got to be public servants, they haven't got to be health experts, they've just got to work to a plan. Then they can put it to someone like the health minister or the health lady or Janet Young. Then they can put their decision to them and see what they say.
Yeah. Yeah.
But get someone to qualify them.
Yeah.
Get them moving through.
So do you feel then that if this process was more transparent and we could all inspect it and see what's actually happening, that would help you in a way that you could see whether your confidence is justified in this claim?
Yes, but then the Queensland Government is like every other government in Australia. They're not transparent.
Yeah. Yeah.
You say you're a liar, you say to them they're a liar, they say no we're not.
Yeah.
But they just don't tell you the truth.
Yeah.
And that, in my mind, is tantamount to lying. I was taught, never got on with my father, but I was taught by my father, you should not tell a lie, and if you don't tell the truth, you're telling a lie.
Yeah. Yeah.
Omitting something in a statement, it's the same as telling a lie.
Yeah.
There's not enough transparency in politics in Australia. Name me one politician that has lost a cent out of any of this pandemic. Not one.
Okay.
They all march to the bank once a month and get their little pay. And now they're talking about a pay increase because they've got to work harder in the pandemic. I tell you, any government that passes a pay increase at the moment will never get my vote as long as my bottom points to the ground.
Okay.
That's a long time.
Okay.
You won't have to delete that.
I can see you're super passionate about it, and so are many people.
I am.
And so are many people. And
I mean, I wouldn't go out and demonstrate in the street about it, but I am passionate in my own mind.
Yeah. And I can see many people are hurting, and I'm trying to keep my own bias out of this, and I'm trying to think critically about how could someone who's new to Queensland, who's hearing this for the first time, how can they know in a reliable way that that this policy is immoral if the process is secretive?
It's only
If it's
immoral.
not transparent, if it's not transparent.
It's only immoral in the person's mind morality.
Yeah, so
I
in
would
terms
suggest,
of causing harm.
I would dare to suggest that someone who bought a house in Coomberbar
Yeah,
and they live in Footscray,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And we don't like what's happening in Victoria, we're going to move to Queensland,
yeah,
and then they're stopped at the border,
yeah,
right? They would think that's unfair.
yeah.
Well, I think it's fair because they're just trying to get away.
But that would be an example that's outside of this group that you're talking about, right? You're talking about long-term Queensland residents, vulnerable people,
yeah, but they're
children.
caught up in it. But
Yeah.
you see them interviewed on TV all the time, and they seem to think they've got a right to cross the border because they bought a house in Queensland. Stiff,
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
That gives them no rights whatsoever.
Yeah.
What about the people who've owned a house in Queensland, paid rates in Queensland, paid taxes in Queensland, all their life, and they can't get back in?
Yeah.
To look after their family, to feed their dog even.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you're in an area where you got a lockdown, you can't even get your neighbour to feed your dog because they're not allowed out of the house.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that in your mind, there's way too much harm on the side of locking Queensland residents out than there would be to the harm of letting them in and, you know, this new strain of COVID spreading.
Yeah, I mean, letting them, I'm not saying wholesale just let them in because they're Queenslanders.
Yeah.
They have to be tested, they have to be vaccinated at least one jab.
Okay, yep.
I've got no qualms with that.
Okay.
But what my argument is,
Okay.
they apply for an exemption and they just get
Yeah.
rejected.
So
They don't say, okay, get your first jab,
yeah.
be tested 3 days in a row and return a negative test, then you can come in. What's wrong with that?
Yeah. Well, I don't know if this is the case.
Can I just say another thing?
Yeah.
Overseas, in airports and everywhere else, the first sign of this disease, whether it be the Delta or ever, is temperature.
Yeah.
Now overseas, wherever you go, even going to school, they test your temperature with those forehead things that the doctors are now using.
Yeah.
It took us 10 years to get these. Up until then, they stick a bloody thermometer up your bum. Anyway, now we got them. Why don't we use them? Why can't the police put a temperature thing against someone's forehead? And if they've got a temperature, see you later.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that's the first sign of the disease.
Okay. So here's a hypothetical for you, and I don't know if this is the case. If this was the case, if we learned that the Queensland's policy was today that anyone that's locked out, if they got the first vaccine jab and they got tested and they checked those boxes and they showed that they could isolate in a safe way, that the government would give them an exemption and let them in, would your confidence decrease in this claim if we discover that was true?
If they did that, yeah.
Right. Okay.
If they did that.
Okay.
I mean, look, the thing that's getting me, getting my things in a twist, is that it's just, rejected.
Yeah.
Get your first jab.
Yeah.
I don't care if they say, look, you've got to be tested for 5 days and get a negative result every day.
Yeah.
But at least do something so that they know they're working towards getting back into their home state. That's all.
Now
What's wrong with that?
our way of knowing that that's what they're doing, right? That they're just
They have to,
going,
they have to issue a health order.
Yeah, okay. And our way, like you and I, ordinary Queensland residents, how are we working out that that's what's actually happening? That they're just going no, and not caring and not applying fair criteria. How are we determining that?
Say that again.
Yeah. So we have this view, right, that it's not compassionate. They're not even assessing these things fairly. They're just going no, reject. That's our view. Where do we get this view from, and how do we know that is a reliable way to know it? Yeah. And how do we know that's what's happening? What's the evidence that's showing us?
Because of the news feeds.
So the news.
Yeah. That's the only way we can find out, because the government's won't tell us.
Okay. Now, does the news show us the whole situation or just a portion? Okay.
Probably not. I mean, you get a television camera and you go down to the border, they'll interview one person, you'll only get that person's view. There might be 20 others there with 20 other views.
Okay.
They can't interview everyone.
Yeah. So if we're only getting news sources of a small sample, the worst case scenarios, could that be affecting the way we see the whole thing?
Maybe, but to a very small extent.
Yeah.
Very small extent.
How can we find out? How can we test it?
Because the government is not transparent yet.
So that's the problem.
Yeah. Lack of transparency.
Yeah.
It's like the old saying,
Yeah.
treat them like mushrooms, keep them in the dark and feed them full of bullshit. That's what the government's attitude.
Okay.
You're only the people who voted us in. You're only the people who pay us. Stay where you are and do what you're told.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm not a dog. Up.
Yeah. Okay. So
I just get angry about treating Queenslanders like second-class citizens.
I need to get you some green tea. I can see you getting worked up over this. You can have some of my green tea.
Nah, I'm not a green tea drinker.
Yeah.
I like my tea, but I like my breakfast.
I've been dragging this one out way too long.
I know.
I'm worried
It's about
about
half an hour so far.
I'm worried about you.
We're going to get 15 minutes.
Yeah.
You'll have to edit this back to 15 minutes.
I'll fast forward some bits. No, it's been good. Okay, so I'll do a quick summary and we'll wrap it up. So basically, if the Queensland Government was doing this, then this would be immoral. We feel that, or you feel that the government is doing this because you get this information from news sources. It's only a sample, but the problem is knowing whether that's representative of the whole situation is difficult because it's not transparent, hence the problem. What would decrease your confidence about this is if it was transparent and we discovered that they had a fair criteria for granting exemptions. If you had the jab, if you got tested, and they fairly gave exemptions on that basis to let Queenslanders in, and they could show that they could safely self-isolate, that would decrease your confidence in the claim. Is that a fair summary?
Yep.
Excellent. Thank you, Wayne.
Let me just finish by saying this. I mean, you talk about transparency, right?
Yeah.
People got upset because she let a whole 100 odd people on an aeroplane from the football side of things to come into the state.
Yes.
Now when that hit the fan, you know what she said?
Sorry?
No. She has not apologised for that. She said, well, it's happened now, we can't change it. It shouldn't have happened, but it's happened.
I think I heard her apologise, but I remember thinking that.
It's like, look, we talk about government. New South Wales, Berejiklian, right? In the middle of a pandemic, with 1,500 cases a day, she decides she's not going to do a press conference every day anymore.
Yeah.
What a dumb move. There was so much fury about it. She's still doing it. I mean, they don't read the people. And you know why they don't read the people? Because they employ advisors straight out of university who wouldn't know.
With your permission, I'm going to send you the video of this, but what I'm going to do is, there's a couple of things I'm going to beep out. Like when you called her you're okay if I beep that out? Because I want to protect you as well. Don't do any visuals. I'll have to blur that out. So I'm going to beep that out. I'm going to fast forward some of the rants. Right? But apart from that, I think it was a great conversation.
You do what you think you should do. Turn that off now.
Yeah, okay. Thanks, mate. All right.